The alien invasion. It was a peaceful evening on Earth. People were going about their usual routines, unaware of the threat that was about to arrive. The sky was clear and life felt normal. But far beyond the atmosphere, something terrible was heading toward the planet. In deep space, a fleet of massive alien ships was approaching Earth at a terrifying speed. The alien race, known as the Extraterrestrials, had decided it was time to conquer humanity. The Extraterrestrials had already taken over several planets in the galaxy. They believed themselves to be superior in technology and strength. No race had ever been able to stand against them. To them, Earth was just another target, and the humans seemed weak and unprepared for a real fight. Their leader, General Kratos, was confident. "Humans are primitive. This will be easy," he said, as his warship led the invasion fleet. Thousands of alien soldiers prepared for battle, ready to attack Earth's cities and crush any resistance. The Extraterrestrials had powerful weapons, advanced chips, and technology that Earth had never seen before. But what General Kratos and his fleet didn't know was that Earth had been preparing in secret. Humanity had always been underestimated by others in the galaxy. Behind the scenes, the world governments had been working together to build a defense system unlike anything the Extraterrestrials had ever faced. As the alien fleet neared Earth, alarms rang out across major cities. People looked up, confused and afraid. What they saw was unbelievable. Giant alien ships filling the sky, blocking out the sun, casting massive shadows over everything. Panic spread quickly. But while civilians were scared, Earth's military forces were ready. Commander Alex, the leader of Earth's Defense Command, stood in front of the giant screen that showed the alien ships in orbit. He knew this moment would come one day, and they had been quietly preparing for years. His calm voice echoed through the command center as he gave orders to activate Earth's defense systems. "Activate the planetary shields," he said. A low hum filled the air as energy shields around Earth's major cities powered up. These shields had been developed in secret, designed to protect against heavy bombardments from space. The Extraterrestrials may have thought they could easily destroy Earth, but they were about to get a surprise. The Extraterrestrials began their assault, sending wave after wave of energy blasts down at the cities. But to their shock, the blasts hit the shields and bounced off, causing no damage. General Kratos frowned as he watched from his ship. "What is this?" he growled. "They have shields." Back on Earth, Commander Alex smiled slightly. "Let's see how they handle our next surprise," he said to his team. He gave the command to launch Earth's first counterattack. From hidden bases across the world, massive missile silos opened and advanced fighter jets shot into the sky. These weren't ordinary planes. They were equipped with the latest in human technology, built to take on alien invaders. The missiles were designed to lock onto the alien ships, and within moments, explosions filled the sky as human forces struck back. The Extraterrestrials weren't expecting humans to fight back so fiercely. Their ships were powerful, but the humans were quick and strategic. For the first time in his long career, General Kratos felt a twinge of uncertainty. On the ground, ordinary people watched in awe as Earth's military fought the aliens. The once peaceful evening had turned into chaos, but there was also a sense of hope. Maybe humans weren't as weak as the aliens thought. Maybe they could stand a chance. Lieutenant Sarah, a brilliant strategist and one of Commander Alex's closest allies, looked at the battle maps in the command center. "The Extraterrestrials are getting closer," she said. "But if we keep pushing with our new tech, we might be able to stop their ground invasion." Alex nodded. "We've held them off for now, but this is just the beginning. They'll send their troops down soon. We need to be ready." As the night continued, the battle in the sky raged on. Earth had managed to protect its cities with shields and had struck back with powerful weapons, but the alien fleet was still massive. The Extraterrestrials began deploying their ground forces, sending dropships full of soldiers to invade the planet directly. The invasion had begun, and the real fight was about to start. Humanity had shown, that they wouldn't go down without a fight. The extraterrestrials were powerful, but they had underestimated the strength and resilience of the human race. As General Kratos watched from his ship, he clenched his fists. "We will crush these humans," he snarled. But deep down, he was starting to realize that this battle might not be as easy as he had thought. The war for Earth had begun, and humanity's firepower was just starting to reveal itself. Humanity's secret weapon. The extraterrestrial fleet had begun their descent, sending dropships to land their troops on Earth. Their initial aerial attack had been met with unexpected resistance, but General Kratos was determined to overwhelm the humans with sheer force. From the command center on his flagship, he watched as the drop pods streaked toward the planet's surface like falling stars. On Earth, Commander Alex stood at the helm of Earth's Defense Command, his eyes fixed on the screens displaying the incoming threat. The extraterrestrials' ground forces were unlike anything humans had ever faced. These weren't just soldiers. These were towering, armored alien warriors, equipped with energy weapons and brutal combat machines. "We need to hold the cities," Alex said calmly, but the weight of the situation was clear in his voice. "Their ground troops will be fierce, but they don't know what we've been hiding." Lieutenant Sarah stood by his side, analyzing the data streaming in from the battlefront. "The extraterrestrials are fast, but we still have one thing they don't expect," she said with a smirk. Alex nodded. "Deploy Project Thunderstrike." At that moment, deep underground and secret military bases scattered across the world, a new kind of weapon was being prepared. Humanity's true secret weapon wasn't just the shields that had protected their cities. It was something far more powerful, something they had been working on for decades in total secrecy. Energy-based weapons that could rival the advanced technology of the extraterrestrials. The extraterrestrials believed they had the upper hand with their advanced tech, but Earth had its own game-changing weapon, hidden from the world until now. These new weapons were a combination of cutting-edge human engineering and reverse-engineered alien technology from past encounters. As the extraterrestrial drop pods landed in cities across the globe, releasing squads of towering alien soldiers, human resistance forces rushed into action. But this time, they weren't using conventional weapons. They were equipped with the new plasma rifles and pulse cannons designed to match and even surpass the alien invaders' power. The first battle occurred in New Haven, a major city in North America. A wave of extraterrestrial soldiers marched through the streets, their energy weapons cutting through cars and buildings with ease. Civilians ran for cover, and for a moment, it looked like the aliens would destroy everything in their path. But then, the human military arrived. A squad of human soldiers appeared from around a corner, led by Sergeant Miller, a veteran who had fought in countless wars. His team was armed with the new plasma rifles, and with a single order, they opened fire. Bright blue energy beams shot across the battlefield, slamming into the extraterrestrials' armored bodies. To the aliens' shock, their armor, designed to resist most known forms of attack, was no match for the plasma blasts. The extraterrestrials had expected an easy victory, but within seconds, several of their soldiers fell to the ground, their armor pierced by the humans' weapons. Sergeant Miller grinned. "I think we've got their attention now." Back in the command center, Commander Alex watched the live feed from New Haven. The plasma weapons were working even better than expected. "Good," he muttered. "But we'll need more than just ground troops." He turned to Lieutenant Sarah. "Is the Valkyrie Mech's squadron ready?" Sarah nodded. "They're ready to deploy. This will be the first time they see real combat." The Valkyrie Mechs were another secret project. Giant, human-controlled robots designed to fight against large-scale alien threats. Each mech was equipped with heavy artillery, advanced targeting systems, and a layer of the same energy shields that protected the cities. As the extraterrestrials began to push deeper into New Haven, the ground shook, and a low rumble echoed through the streets. The extraterrestrial soldiers stopped, confused for a moment. Then, from the shadows of the city's tallest buildings, the Valkyrie mechs emerged. Standing 3 stories tall, the mechs moved with surprising speed for their size. They were equipped with massive plasma cannons and missile launchers, and as they stepped into the battlefield, they unleashed a barrage of firepower that lit up the sky. The extraterrestrials, unprepared for this level of resistance, were caught off guard. Their energy weapons, which had torn through human vehicles and buildings, barely scratched the surface of the mech's energy shields. The Valkyries were unstoppable. General Kratos, watching from his flagship, slammed his fist on the control panel. "How do these humans have such weapons?" he roared. His confidence was shaken for the first time since the invasion had begun. On the ground, the tide of battle had turned. Human forces, with their new plasma weapons and the unstoppable Valkyrie mechs, were pushing the extraterrestrials back. The aliens, who had expected an easy victory, found themselves struggling against humanity's unexpected firepower. But even as Earth celebrated its first victory, Commander Alex knew this was only the beginning. "They won't give up so easily," he said quietly to Sarah. "The extraterrestrials are too proud. This is just the start of a much bigger war." Sarah nodded. "But we've shown them one not invincible, and we've only just begun to fight." The extraterrestrials strike back. General Kratos stood before the Central Command hologram, glaring at the battlefield reports. His invasion fleet had been humiliated by the humans, primitive creatures he had once considered insignificant. Now those same humans had managed to not only withstand the initial wave, but also decimate Xorathian ground forces with strange, advanced technology. He slammed his clawed fist down on the command table. "Enough. I will not be outmatched by a backward species." His voice boomed across the command deck. The Xorathians had underestimated Earth, and that miscalculation had cost them dearly. But now, Kratos was ready to retaliate with full force. The time for restraint was over. The humans had revealed their hand, and now it was his turn. "Prepare the Omega Battalion," he barked. The Omega Battalion was Kratos' most elite force, genetically enhanced warriors with cutting-edge armor, faster and stronger than anything the humans had faced. Meanwhile, on Earth, Commander Alex and his team were regrouping after their first victory. Though humanity had managed to push back the extraterrestrials, the tension in the command center was palpable. Alex knew the aliens wouldn't stay down for long. The humans had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Satellite feeds are showing increased activity from the alien mothership. Lieutenant Sarah reported, her voice steady but urgent. "They're gathering forces for another attack. But this time it's different. These aren't the same soldiers we fought earlier." Alex studied the images on the screens, his brow furrowed. The extraterrestrial forces were reorganizing. The dropships were different, larger, carrying more advanced equipment. And the soldiers they deployed, bigger, faster, armored in a way that their plasma rifles might not easily pierce. "They've sent in their elite forces," Alex muttered. He turned to his team. "We've dealt them a blow, but now they're going to hit us harder. We need to be ready." Across the city of Elysium, one of Earth's most fortified locations, alarms blared as civilians scrambled for safety. Human defense forces were on high alert, setting up barricades and preparing their plasma weapons. They had just barely survived the first attack, but now the elite Xorathian forces were descending. The Omega Battalion hit the ground like a storm, their drop pods smashing into the city streets. When they emerged, their towering figures gleamed with the reflective, high-tech armor that seemed impenetrable. Their weapons were more advanced than anything the human soldiers had seen, and they moved with terrifying precision and speed. Sergeant Miller, who had been instrumental in the first victory, stood at the front lines with his squad. He eyed the approaching Xorathians with a grim expression. "This is it, boys. They'd brought out their best, but we're not going down without a fight." The battle was fierce. Plasma beams fired across the streets, but the Omega soldiers moved with lightning speed, dodging attacks and returning fire with devastating accuracy. Human soldiers were forced to retreat as the Xorathians pressed forward, their superior technology and combat prowess overwhelming the defenders. Sergeant Miller and his squad took cover behind a crumbling building, firing their weapons at the advancing aliens. "We need backup," Miller shouted into his comms, but he already knew it would take time for reinforcements to arrive. Time they didn't have. In the command center, Alex watched the battle unfold, his heart pounding. "We need to get the Valkyrie mechs into the fight," he ordered. The towering robots had been crucial in the earlier victory, and they were humanity's best hope of pushing back the Extraterrestrials once more. But there was a problem. The mechs were still recharging from the last battle. They wouldn't be ready for several more hours. "We're out of time," Alex muttered, frustration boiling inside him. "We need to find another way." Suddenly, Sarah's voice broke through the tension. "Commander, we may not have the Valkyries, but there's another option." Alex turned to her, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" Sarah tapped on her console, pulling up a schematic of a hidden underground facility. "We've been developing something else, something that might just turn the tide." Alex's eyes widened as he realized what she was referring to. "You mean Project Phoenix?" Project Phoenix was Earth's last resort weapon, a prototype space fighter, faster and more powerful than any craft ever built. It was designed for situations exactly like this. The problem was, it had never been tested in live combat. "There's no other choice," Alex said after a moment of silence. "We need to activate Phoenix now." Back on the battlefield, the human forces were struggling to hold their ground. The Omega Battalion was relentless, cutting through human defenses with brutal efficiency. Sergeant Miller was running low on ammunition, and his squad was barely holding the line. "We can't keep this up much longer," one of his soldiers yelled, ducking behind a pile of rubble. Miller gritted his teeth. "Just hold on a little longer. Reinforcements are coming." High above the battlefield, the sky suddenly roared with the sound of jet engines. Everyone, human and Thorethian, looked up as a sleek, silver craft shot through the atmosphere at impossible speed. Project Phoenix had been launched. Project Phoenix unleashed. The atmosphere crackled with tension as the sleek silver craft shot across the battlefield skies. Project Phoenix, Earth's untested last resort weapon, was now in play. The Extraterrestrials, who had been steadily advancing with their elite Omega Battalion, turned their alien eyes toward the roaring fighter. Their confidence, which had grown with each human retreat, now wavered as they witnessed the craft's impossible speed and agility. In the human command center, Commander Alex leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen displaying the Phoenix's live feed. This was it, the weapon they hoped would turn the tide of the war. "How is it holding up?" Alex asked, unable to hide the tension in his voice. Lieutenant Sarah monitored the craft's vitals. "So far, it's performing above expectations, Commander. Speed, power, all systems are green." Alex nodded, but his jaw was still clenched. Project Phoenix was Earth's greatest hope, but it had never been tested in live combat. Today, that was about to change. On the battlefield below, Sergeant Miller and his squad watched in awe as the Phoenix circled above, its engines screaming like a fury unleashed. They had been on the brink of losing ground to the Omega Battalion, but now something was different. Miller keyed his radio. "Command, is that what I think it is?" "Affirmative." Alex's voice came through the crackling comms. "Hold your position. Phoenix is going to hit the Thorethians hard." Miller smirked under his helmet. "About time we had something to make these aliens sweat." High above the city, the Phoenix's pilot, Captain Eleanor Drake, locked onto her targets, Thorethian dropships that were preparing to unleash even more elite soldiers onto the battlefield. Her fingers danced over the controls, activating the ship's advanced plasma cannons. "Let's see how these invaders like a taste of human firepower," she muttered. With a sudden flash, the Phoenix unleashed a barrage of energy bolts that tore through the alien ships like paper. One after another, the dropships exploded in a shower of fire and debris, lighting up the sky. The Thorethian ground forces, who had been marching confidently, now hesitated as their reinforcements went up in flames. But the Omega Battalion was not easily deterred. Seeing the destruction of their dropships, they regrouped quickly, their tactical minds already adapting to the new threat. They fired at the Phoenix with high-powered energy weapons, beams of light streaking through the sky toward the human craft. Drake gritted her teeth, dodging and weaving through the barrage. "They're not giving up easy," she muttered. The Phoenix danced between the energy blasts, its agility unmatched by anything in the Xorethian arsenal. Drake angled her ship toward the ground, descending at an impossible speed before pulling up at the last second, skimming just above the Omega soldiers. "Deploying plasma strike," she announced. With a flick of a switch, the Phoenix unleashed a wide burst of plasma energy, engulfing the battlefield below. The ground shook as the powerful blast struck, vaporizing several Xorethian soldiers and sending the rest scattering for cover. In the command center, cheers erupted as the live feed showed the Xorethians falling back. "They're retreating," Sarah exclaimed, disbelief mixed with excitement. Alex didn't celebrate just yet. "We've hurt them, but they're not defeated." He turned to Sarah. "What's the status on the rest of their fleet?" Sarah quickly checked her monitors. "Their mothership is holding position. It seems like they're pulling back for now. But what?" Alex pressed. Sarah frowned. "There's something strange about their energy signatures. I think they're charging up for something big." Alex's eyes narrowed. "Keep an eye on it. Let me know the moment anything changes." Meanwhile, down on the battlefield, Sergeant Miller and his squad were advancing, cautiously pushing forward as the Omega Battalion fell back. Miller kept his rifle trained on the enemy, but his mind was racing. "They're retreating. But this feels wrong," Miller muttered. He had been in enough battles to know when an enemy was regrouping for a counterstrike. "We should be celebrating, Sarge," one of his soldiers said, his voice tinged with relief. "That new ship, they never stood a chance." Miller wasn't so sure. "Stay sharp. They're not done with us yet." Back in the skies, Captain Drake circled the Phoenix around, scanning for any remaining targets. The Xorethians had pulled back, but she could feel it too. This battle wasn't over. "Command, I'm getting weird energy readings from the enemy mothership," she reported. Alex's voice came through her earpiece, tense. "We see it too. It looks like they're preparing to launch something. Stay on high alert." Suddenly, the air was filled with a deep, ominous hum. It wasn't the sound of any weapon Drake had encountered before. Her sensors began to light up with warnings as the mothership in the distance started glowing, its energy output spiking. "They're preparing to fire some kind of superweapon," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with urgency. Drake didn't wait for further orders, engaging evasive maneuvers. Just as she began to pull the Phoenix into a sharp turn, a massive beam of energy shot from the Xorethian mothership, tearing through the sky like a lance of pure destruction. It was heading straight for Earth's defenses. In the command center, Alex stood frozen, watching in horror as the beam neared the city. "Brace for impact," he yelled. But just as the beam was about to hit, a bright flash of light erupted from the Phoenix as Drake activated the ship's experimental plasma shield. The shield absorbed the energy, flaring bright blue, but holding steady. In the silence that followed, the battlefield was eerily still. The Xorethians had retreated, and Project Phoenix had saved the city from total annihilation. Drake exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was too close. Alex's voice came through the comms, full of relief. "You did it, Captain. You saved us all." For now, humanity had the upper hand. But both Alex and Drake knew this war was far from over. The Xorethians' counterstrike. The quiet after the battle was unsettling. Earth's forces, still on edge from the recent victory, couldn't afford to relax. In the command center, Alex and his team reviewed the data from the mothership's failed attack. But deep down, everyone knew that the Xorethians would return, stronger and more determined than ever. "They won't give up that easily," Alex said, staring at the holographic display of the enemy fleet regrouping in the distance. Lieutenant Sarah nodded, concern etched on her face. They've lost too much to back off now. They'll strike again soon, and I have a feeling it'll be bigger than before. Out on the battlefield, Sergeant Miller and his squad were patrolling the debris-strewn streets. Despite the victory, something felt off. The sky was too quiet, the calm too unnatural. "I don't like this," Miller muttered, scanning the horizon. "We should have seen more action by now." Private Harris, a fresh recruit, walked beside him, clutching his rifle nervously. "Think they've given up, Sarge. That Phoenix ship did a number on them." Miller shook his head. "The Extraterrestrials don't give up, kid. They're regrouping. Mark my words." As if on cue, alarms blared in the distance, and a deep rumbling sound filled the air. The ground beneath their feet began to shake violently, causing the squad to stumble. "Incoming," Miller shouted, raising his weapon. His soldiers snapped into action, taking cover behind the nearest buildings. Above them, the sky seemed to tear open as dozens of Extraterrestrial warships emerged from hyperspace, their engines roaring as they descended toward Earth's surface. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was a full-scale invasion. In the command center, the team scrambled to respond. "They're hitting us hard, Commander," Sarah called out as new waves of enemy ships appeared on the radar. Alex cursed under his breath. "We need to get Phoenix back in the air. Now." "Already on it," Sarah replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "Captain Drake is prepped and ready to launch." In the Phoenix's cockpit, Captain Drake was already strapping in, her mind sharp and focused. "Time for round 2, she muttered, powering up the engines. The sleek fighter roared to life, lifting off the ground and streaking toward the battlefield. Down below, Miller's squad watched as the Phoenix shot past them, heading straight for the enemy fleet. "There she goes again," Harris said, awe in his voice. Miller smiled grimly. "Let's hope she can turn the tide again." But this time, the Extraterrestrials were ready. Their ships moved in perfect formation, coordinating their attacks with ruthless precision. Bright beams of energy lashed out from their warships, targeting the Phoenix and Earth's remaining defenses. Captain Drake found herself in the fight of her life. The Phoenix's agility and advanced weaponry gave her an edge, but the Extraterrestrials' numbers were overwhelming. She dodged and weaved through a hailstorm of enemy fire, returning shots whenever she could, but it was clear they had learned from their previous defeat. "Command, I'm taking heavy fire," Drake reported, her voice tense. "They've upgraded their ships. This isn't like last time." "We see it, Phoenix," Alex responded, his voice calm but urgent. "Hang in there. We're deploying ground reinforcements and missile batteries." On the ground, Miller's squad moved into position as waves of Extraterrestrial infantry began landing. Their dropships touched down with a heavy thud, and the alien soldiers poured out in perfect formation, ready for combat. "Hold the line," Miller ordered, opening fire on the advancing troops. His squad followed suit, their rifles lighting up the battlefield. The Extraterrestrials fought with cold efficiency, their precision unnerving. For every alien that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. Miller's squad was holding, but only barely. "We're getting overrun," Harris yelled, reloading his rifle as fast as he could. Miller gritted his teeth, firing off a few more rounds. "We can't fall back. We hold this position no matter what." In the skies above, Drake was locked in a fierce dogfight with a squadron of Extraterrestrial fighters. The Phoenix's shields flared as they absorbed hit after hit, but they couldn't take much more. "Command, I'm getting pinned down," Drake called out, pulling the Phoenix into a steep climb to avoid a barrage of plasma fire. "We're losing ground down here too," Alex replied, his voice strained. "I'm authorizing the use of advanced ground artillery. Hold them off for as long as you can." In the command center, Sarah worked furiously to bring the new weapons online. "We've never used these systems in battle before," she muttered to herself. "We don't have a choice," Alex said grimly. "It's now or never." Moments later, the ground shook again, but this time it was from Earth's own forces. Massive artillery units rolled into position, their cannons glowing with energy as they prepared to fire. The first shot thundered across the battlefield, striking a Xorethian warship in the distance and tearing it apart in a brilliant explosion. Miller's squad cheered as the artillery blasts began to push the alien forces back. "That's more like it," Miller shouted over the noise of battle. But even as the tide seemed to turn, there was a chilling realization among the human forces. The Xorethians were adapting too quickly. Their tactics were evolving in real time, and their firepower was increasing. "We may have won this round," Alex said to Sarah, watching the battlefield carefully. "But this war is far from over. The Xorethians are learning with every strike." In the skies, Captain Drake managed to break free from the enemy fighters, her ship battered but still flying. She looked out at the devastated battlefield below and knew that while they had survived another day, the real fight was still ahead. Humanity's secret weapon. The battlefield lay in ruins. Smoldering wreckage littered the streets, and the once proud buildings of Earth's defense cities now stood as broken silhouettes against the horizon. The Xorethians, relentless in their pursuit, continued to push forward despite Earth's best efforts to hold the line. Captain Drake, Commander Alex, and Sergeant Miller knew that the next wave of attacks could be the end, but they weren't out of options yet. Deep within the command center, Alex stared at the holographic map, watching as the Xorethian forces closed in. "We can't hold them off much longer," he muttered. His mind raced through every tactic, every defense they had left. But the enemy was simply too strong. Sarah, standing beside him, looked uneasy. "There's one option we haven't considered," she said quietly, almost afraid to speak. Alex turned to her, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "Project Aegis." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she was talking about. The secret weapon Earth had developed in the shadows, a last-ditch defense against the Xorethian threat. It was dangerous, untested, and could potentially change everything, or destroy them all. "We were never supposed to use it," Alex said, frowning. "It's too risky." "But we have no choice," Sarah replied. "If we don't deploy it now, we lose everything. The Xorethians are too strong. They're learning, adapting. We can't keep up." Alex looked at the map again. His jaw clenched. Prepare Project Aegis. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Miller and his squad were fighting tooth and nail to hold their position. The Xorethian forces were closing in on all sides, and the human soldiers were running low on ammunition. "We can't keep this up, Sarge," Harris shouted over the deafening sounds of gunfire and explosions. Miller, battered and covered in dirt, barked back, "We hold until we can't." No one retreats, but even he knew the situation was grim. His squad had been fighting for hours, and the Xorethians showed no signs of slowing. Just then, the sky above darkened, and a strange hum filled the air. Miller looked up, confused. "What the hell is that?" Out of nowhere, a massive energy field began to form, expanding from the center of the city and spreading outwards. It shimmered with a strange, pulsing light, enveloping the battlefield in an eerie glow. "Command, what's happening?" Miller shouted into his comms. In the command center, Alex watched as the holographic display lit up with warnings. "It's Aegis," he said, his voice low. "It's online." Project Aegis was Earth's final defense, a massive energy shield capable of neutralizing any known form of alien technology. But it wasn't just a shield. It was also a weapon. As the energy field expanded, the Xorethian ships and infantry began to falter. Their weapons sputtered, and their ships lost power, falling from the sky like stones. On the ground, the alien soldiers collapsed, their advanced armor and weapons rendered useless by the invisible force. Miller and his squad watched in disbelief as the tide of battle suddenly shifted in their favor. "What is this?" Harris muttered, eyes wide. "It's our secret weapon," Miller replied, a grin forming on his face. "Looks like Earth's got a few tricks left." In orbit, Captain Drake flew the Phoenix alongside the energy field, watching as the Thorethian fleet began to disintegrate. Their ships, once nearly invincible, now floated dead in space, vulnerable to Earth's counterattacks. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. It was time to finish this. "Command, the Thorethians are disabled. Permission to engage." "Permission granted." Alex's voice came through the comms. "Take them out." With a nod, Drake accelerated toward the nearest Thorethian warship, her finger hovering over the weapon's trigger. The Phoenix's cannons lit up, and beams of concentrated energy ripped through the alien ship's hull, reducing it to rubble in seconds. One by one, Earth's forces began to eliminate the Thorethian fleet, striking with precise, lethal blows. But even as the humans celebrated their apparent victory, Alex's mind was racing. Project Aegis was powerful, yes, but it was also unstable. The energy field was growing, spreading far beyond its intended range. If they couldn't control it, it could consume everything in its path. "Sarah, we need to shut it down," Alex said, his voice tense. Sarah was already working at the controls, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm trying, but the system's not responding. It's going rogue." Alex cursed under his breath. "If we don't get this under control, we'll lose the entire planet." In the skies above, Captain Drake noticed the energy field expanding. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. But it wasn't stopping. It kept growing, reaching farther and farther into space. "Command, something's wrong with the field," Drake reported, panic creeping into her voice. "We know," Alex replied. "We're trying to contain it. But right now, you need to keep taking out the remaining Thorethians. We can't afford to let them regroup." Drake nodded, though her mind was racing. She focused on the task at hand, firing shot after shot at the disabled Thorethian ships. But the expanding energy field was always in the back of her mind. On the ground, Miller and his squad had regrouped with other human forces, watching as the Thorethian troops were wiped out by the mysterious energy. But they, too, noticed that something was off. The energy wasn't stopping. "What's happening now?" Harris asked, fear evident in his voice. "I don't know," Miller replied, his face grim. "But whatever it is, it doesn't look good." Back in the command center, alarms blared as the energy field continued to grow, threatening to spiral out of control. Alex looked at Sarah, desperation in his eyes. "We have to stop it." "I'm doing everything I can," Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration. "But Aegis is evolving. It's not just a weapon anymore. It's something else. Then we need to figure out what it is before it destroys us all," Alex said, his voice hard. "This battle isn't over yet." A new dawn. The energy field from Project Aegis had grown beyond anyone's control. It shimmered across the sky like a second sun, expanding rapidly and threatening to consume everything in its path. Humanity's greatest weapon had defeated the Thorethians, but now it was turning against them. In the command center, alarms continued to blare. Alex and Sarah frantically worked the controls, but every attempt to shut the system down was met with failure. The field was evolving, becoming something far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. "How much time do we have?" Alex asked, his voice strained with urgency. Sarah shook her head. "Minutes. Maybe less. If we don't stop this, the field will devour the planet." Outside, the remaining Thorethian forces had been all but destroyed, their ships and soldiers neutralized by the overwhelming power of Aegis. On the battlefield, Miller and his squad stood in awe as the once invincible invaders crumbled. But their victory was short-lived as they watched the energy field continue to grow. "Is this how it ends?" Harris asked, his voice filled with dread. Miller gritted his teeth. Not if we can help it. Back in the command center, Sarah suddenly froze, her eyes wide with realization. There's one way to stop it. Alex looked at her sharply. What is it? She hesitated, the weight of her words heavy. We have to destroy the core. It's the only way to collapse the field. Alex's heart sank. The core of Project Aegis was deep within the Earth's crust, heavily fortified, and surrounded by layers of protection. Destroying it would not only disable the field, but it could cause catastrophic damage to the planet. Are you saying we have to sacrifice the Earth to save it? Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. No, Sarah replied. But we have to be precise. If we can detonate a controlled charge at the core, it should destabilize the field without destroying everything else. It's risky, but it's our only option. Alex stared at the holographic display, watching as the field crept closer and closer. He knew there was no time to debate. Do it. Captain Drake piloted the Phoenix high above the Earth, watching as the field expanded like a tidal wave of energy. The Extraterrestrials were gone, but the threat remained. She was ready to face anything, but this was beyond what she could comprehend. Command, what's happening down there? She asked through the comms. Alex's voice came through, tense but focused. We're initiating a plan to take out the core. It's our last shot. Drake took a deep breath, steadying herself. What do you need me to do? We need you to escort a team to the core, Alex explained. You'll have to get them there, and fast. It's in a heavily fortified area beneath the surface. Understood, Drake replied. I'll get them there. Within minutes, a small team of Earth's best engineers and explosive experts boarded the Phoenix. Their mission: reach the core and detonate the charge that would stop the expanding energy field. As the Phoenix descended into the atmosphere, Drake could feel the pressure mounting. Time was running out, and every second counted. She pushed the ship to its limits, dodging the debris from destroyed Sorathian ships and flying through the energy field that now covered the sky like a dome. On the ground, Miller and his squad regrouped at a makeshift base, watching as the Phoenix streaked across the sky toward the heart of the planet. That's our last hope, Miller muttered. They'd better make it. The Phoenix reached the entrance to the core facility, deep within an ancient mountain range that had been repurposed into Earth's last defense. The team rushed out of the ship, carrying the charges needed to destroy the core. Inside the facility, the air was thick with tension. The hum of Project Aegis could be felt in the walls, vibrating through the floor as if the planet itself was alive. The core glowed with an ominous light, pulsing in rhythm with the expanding field above. The team worked quickly, setting up the charges with precision. Every second brought them closer to either salvation or destruction. Drake stood guard, watching the facility's entrances for any sign of trouble. But the only threat now was the ticking clock. How long? Drake asked, her voice tight. Almost done, one of the engineers replied. Just a few more seconds. Finally, the last charge was set. The engineer turned to Drake and gave a nod. We're ready. Drake activated her comms. Command, charges are in place. We're ready to detonate. In the command center, Alex and Sarah held their breath. This was it, the moment of truth. Do it, Alex said. The charges detonated with a massive explosion, shaking the ground and sending a shockwave through the facility. The core shattered, its light flickering and dying as the energy field above began to collapse in on itself. In the sky, the once expanding field now retracted, folding inwards and shrinking until it disappeared entirely. The sky cleared, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Earth was calm. In the aftermath of the explosion, Drake and her team emerged from the facility, battered but alive. The mission had succeeded. Back at the command center, Alex and Sarah watched as the monitors went blank. The danger was over. Project Aegis had been stopped, and Earth had been saved. Is it over? Sarah asked, her voice filled with relief. Alex nodded. It's over. In the days that followed, humanity began to rebuild. The extraterrestrial threat had been neutralized, and Earth had survived the unimaginable. But the cost had been great, and the scars of the battle would remain for years to come. Miller, Harris, and the rest of the surviving soldiers stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking out at the ruins of what had once been their home. "We won," Miller said quietly, but there was no joy in his voice. "We survived," Harris corrected, "and now we rebuild." As the sun set on a battered Earth, humanity stood victorious, not just because of their unmatched firepower, but because of their resilience, their unity, and their determination to fight for survival against impossible odds.